Championship weekend in college football is over, and we'll recap all the action. College football Final Four is set. We'll give you our initial thoughts. The bowls are also set, and we'll have our first impression picks. We will also update the latest college football coaching moves, as well as the top headlines and results for Week 13 in the NFL, as OFN Week in Review on the Ourlads Football Radio Network starts now. All right, thanks for tuning in to another Ourlads Football Network program for this Monday. That's right, we're in December, everybody. December the 4th, 2017. And I'm your host, Greg DePalma. So we've got a lot to cover here in a short period of time. And I'll tell you what we're not going to do is start off with Eli Manning and the New York Giants. I think we're going to save the fans from that. How about that? But instead, let's take a look at, actually, I'm going to tell you how yesterday we did the fantasy football show in the morning, as we always do. And then, I had a lot of stuff to get to before a very busy day of football. I felt like, all right, this is a great opportunity for me to kind of sit back and relax and enjoy some football. But first, at 12 o'clock, because I don't really watch any of the pregame shows, because the pregame shows stopped being good when Chris Berman retired, and actually probably about 5 or 6 years before Chris Berman retired, because way back when it was just Chris Berman, Tom Jackson, and maybe they had a co-analyst or two, that was fine. Of course, then they started a flood. I had no reason to ever tune in for that. And, of course, we have to go all the way back to the NFL Today with Brent Musburger. But, yeah, it just wasn't any fun. And I had no reason at all to watch the NFL, the pregame, except for the fact that, hey, wait a second. Before I get ready for football, I know what I'm going to watch. I'm going to tune in. You know what? Give me my college football. I need to check out my brackets, and I need to find out exactly what is going on for the college football playoff. So what I did was I grabbed my pencil, my number 2 pencil, and I got in my I sat down and I said I'm ready. I turned on ESPN, and you know what? Since I recorded it, I was lucky enough, because as you know, I record everything, I DVR everything. So they said, okay, 12:30 is when we're going to talk about the playoffs. So I said, okay, great. I fast forwarded right to 12:30. So I'm sitting there at 12:30. I got my number 2 pencil. I've got my piece of paper there, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to fill out my bracket. This is awesome. This is just like college basketball, ain't it? Well, apparently, no, it's not like college basketball, because they started right with the Final Four. And I'm like, wait a second, what's the deal with the Final Four? I don't ever start with the Final Four when I fill out my brackets. What's going on here? And then I realized, well, yeah, that's because this is actually college football. And college football, there are no 64 teams. There are no 16 teams. And there's not even 8 teams. There's just a Final Four. So I really didn't need my number 2 pencil. And I didn't really need anything at all. So all I needed was, I guess, was just to sit back and check out their little top 6. I mean, that was their way of, I guess, making it kind of thrilling. It really wasn't thrilling. So then we got to, okay, we're going to have a debate. We're going to talk about whether this was the right move or not. And we can get into all that, and that's fine. Because, sure, I mean, there's definitely a debate on whether or not you think Ohio State should be in or Alabama should be in, and I get all that. I think it was kind of humorous that they put USC up there as a potential team, USC, Ohio State, and Alabama, and then Wisconsin actually got the number 6 spot. That just shows you. Look, I've listened to a lot of the experts today talk about the whole system So I will say this, any of the experts out there, or I should say any of the TV analysts out there that say that the system is just fine and 4 teams is enough, I don't think, I think either that person needs to be set aside first before he says such. Somebody needs to somebody needs to warn them because some people, I mean, even David Pollock, I mean, he made some sense on ESPN today when he was talking about some of the other things that he was being asked to offer comments on. But David Pollock thinks the system's okay and 4 teams are fine. Well, David, you were looking pretty good there. And actually, you know what? Because that was the first thing that they asked him. And unfortunately, he got off to a really bad start when he was one of the people that decided or felt that the system is okay. Obviously, the system is not okay. No reasonable fan thinks that the system is fine. The system is not fine. 4 teams is not adequate. Any people, including David, that wants to say, "Look, we had an 8-team playoff. We had the quarterfinals on Saturday." That's just ridiculous, David. Quarterfinals on Saturday. I didn't see Alabama play. How can we have a quarterfinal on Saturday if Alabama didn't play? So that's just ridiculous, okay? And then this whole thing about, look, I will say, Feinbaum actually came out and said that, and look, he was, I was surprisingly satisfied with the fact that he wasn't very happy and satisfied himself with some of the comments that were made by the committee over the past week. And he look, I thought he was dead on, straight on, excellent when he talked about the situation with how the committee is going to basically, they're going to shape their and I've said this for the past year, since last year's decision. They're going to shape their answers to conform to who their teams are that they want in. This whole nonsense about having the 4 best teams in is just that. It's nonsense too. And here's why. Because because if you bring up Auburn, well, why is that? Why can't we talk about Auburn? Oh, they got 3 losses. But wait a second. I thought we were getting the 4 best teams. Remember? That's what we were hearing. We're not going to talk about the conference champions. We're not talking about division champions. We're talking about the 4 best teams. All right? Auburn just played Alabama the other day. So explain to me then how Alabama gets in over Auburn. Explain that to me. So Auburn beats Alabama straight up, okay, in a elimination game. In one of David Pollock's, I guess this would be considered I guess you can't consider it. I don't even know. It would be a 4th-round match. So we've got ourselves another elimination game. Auburn and Alabama. Auburn eliminates Alabama. Auburn heads off to play in the SEC championship game. They've now eliminated Alabama. Now Auburn, at that point, only had 2 losses, and nobody was complaining about Auburn's chances of being a 2-loss team in the playoffs. Nobody had anything to say about that. All right. So we have Auburn now losing, so they get 3 losses. So Alabama gets to sneak in over Auburn. All right. Well, how does Alabama sneak in over Auburn? Why? Well, remember, especially since this is supposed to be about the best teams, well, Auburn has 3 losses. Okay. But the only reason that Auburn has 3 losses is because Auburn played an additional game. And the only reason they played the additional game is because they beat Alabama. And when they beat Alabama and they had 2 losses and Alabama had 1 loss, nobody had any problems with that. So if Auburn would have beaten Georgia, nobody would have had a problem with that. They would have said, okay, well, Auburn's just a better team, and that's what we're doing here. We're picking the best teams. So are you getting this? Okay, are you getting this? I'm not trying to sit here and tell you that I think Auburn should be in the Final Four. Let me make sure that that's perfectly clear. And I'm not even trying to sit here and tell you that I don't think Alabama should be in the Final Four of Ohio State. So let's get that perfectly clear. All I am saying is the system is completely flawed, and anybody who thinks that the system is fine, that the 4 teams are fine, they're wrong. They're completely wrong, okay? Not everybody's right about everything that they have an opinion on, but anybody that has an opinion that says 4 teams are fine is just wrong. Now, as far as how it's all going to unfold, and what do we think about the teams as far as who we are going to have in, as who are we going to pick? Well, I mean, look, I have a little bit of time. We've got time. We've got a month. This is another problem with the system, is that we have a whole month. And 1 month just is ridiculous. You know how often that we talk. Remember, we used to talk about the NFL and the Super Bowl. We used to talk about how sometimes the whole 2-week layoff was just not very good. And part of the reason it wasn't very good was because, especially when we had all those blowouts, people used to point to the 2 weeks off. Oh, you can't have 2 weeks off because this is how you get all the blowouts in the NFL, in the Super Bowl. Well, if they thought that there was a possibility of us not getting the best football because of a 2-week layoff in the NFL, well, what about a 1-month layoff in college football? So how come that's not something that we talk about? So that, I mean, and look, I'm not saying that some of the previous championships we've had haven't been awesome, because they have. But then again, I mean, really, if you take a look at the first games before we get to the championship games, like the last couple of years, those games haven't been all particularly good. I mean, we saw Alabama absolutely annihilate Michigan State a couple of years ago. We saw Clemson annihilate Ohio State last year. Alabama had their way with Washington last year. So what does that tell you? That, I mean, and then the very next week, because they just played the week before, then we get ourselves a really good game. So, I mean, it is what it is. There's nothing we can do about it. We talked a lot about it over the last couple of weeks. I just wanted to start with that because there are some people out there that still think, for whatever crazy reason, that everything is just okay with 4 teams, and that is just stupid. All right, and also the whole committee nonsense about how they want to teams. We told you it's just a setup. It's just an opinion. Look, you can put 13 different people. Look, you can put 13 people in there. I could take 13 people that follow college football, and I can take another 13 people, and I can take another 13 people, and I can go on and on and on. I could take 300 people and divide them, or I could take 1,300 people and divide them into whatever that is, 100, and put them all in there, and I guarantee you that they come out with all sorts of different opinions. All right, that there is no way that you would get 4 consensus teams. As a matter of fact, I bet you, because the primary thing too is who do you think the best team is in college football? All right. Now, remember last week they were talking about Vegas. Remember? Because they like to talk about this. I know Herb Street likes to bring it up. Oh, if you take a look at who the favorite's going to be, Vegas would have so-and-so as the favorite. And if that should be some sort of criteria of who Vegas would have as a favorite. So maybe the committee should keep that in mind, that if Team A is like, if there was an actual matchup in the playoffs and Team A would be the favorite over Team B, well, then obviously you have to have Team A in the playoffs, because Vegas says that they are the top team. Well, take a look right now. I don't know if you've noticed or not, but out of the 4 teams that made it to the playoffs, the one team that sneaked in 4th, the one team that there's a debate on between Alabama and Ohio State is who? It's Alabama. And who right now is the consensus favorite as far as Las Vegas is concerned to win the national championship? It's Alabama. Okay, so the team that barely slipped in, the team that if you want to have a debate on, you want to have, all right, well, I'm not so sure that was the right call. I think Ohio State deserves in. Whatever the case may be, fact is, Vegas thinks Alabama's the best team. They barely got in. And you know what? Ohio State could have got in. It's a possibility. We might have. And you know what? We would have a little debate over it. But, I tell you right now, there would have been a decent amount of people that would have just said, you know what? I think they got it right. Same thing that they're saying right now. I think they got it right. I don't think that I don't think there should be too much of an issue here. Ohio State should have got in. They won the Big Ten. Alabama didn't do this, didn't do that, and so forth. All right, maybe we'd have a little bit more of a debate, a little bit more of an indecision. But the fact is, people, I think, would still be kind of okay if Ohio State had gotten in. All right. So what does that tell you? That not everybody, but a decent percentage of people would have been okay if Ohio State had gotten in over Alabama. Yet there is no way Ohio State would have been the number one team as far as the futures are concerned in Vegas to win the championship. Instead, Ohio State would have more than likely been the fourth team. All right. And I know this because Ohio State was the fourth team when I picked them in 2014, and this is nowhere near as good as a team that team was in 2014. So Ohio State would have been the fourth team as far as Vegas is concerned. Where would that have left Alabama? Out, of course. They wouldn't have had a chance to play for the national championship. And yet, Alabama, according to Vegas, is the team to beat. All right. So look, it just proves to you that the system is flawed. It is what it is. And anybody out there that wants to talk about things like, oh well, yeah, but it doesn't matter how many teams there are. Fact is if there's 8 teams or 16 teams, whatever, people are always going to complain. And what have we said about that? Who cares? And I even had some good analysts that said the same thing last week. Who cares? Nobody cares. If we go to an 8 team, sure, we're going to say, hey, you know what? Eventually we'll get to a 16 and then we're going to be really satisfied. But for now, oh yeah, 8's fine. We're okay with 8. Okay, because at least it's better than 2 or 4, which was absolutely ridiculous. So we're fine with 8. Give us about 5 or 6 years, and then we're going to start to get antsy for 16. But we'll keep our mouths shut for a while if we go to 8. No question about that. But anybody that does complain off the bat, like that 9th team, or even if we get to 16 and they complain about the 17, I'll tell you right now, nobody's going to care. Okay, nobody will care about the person who screams about being the 9th team or the 17th team. So will people complain? Yes. Will anybody care? No. It's sort of like the college basketball thing when those final, when you have that debate, the bubble debate, all that is a fun little debate that we have the Monday. That's what we do. It's the college, but we don't sit there and go, I can't believe this team didn't get in because this team, I think I've said that once in my entire career, that a team that I thought did not get into the tournament could have actually made a run to the Final Four or win the national championship. So nobody's really thinking too hard. And it's not even one of those things that even if you debate about it, that you're going to lose sleep over it, or you're going to feel like, oh my God, the system's no good. I'm not even going to pay attention to the games this year in college basketball because they just didn't do this right. Or there's a sour taste in my mouth, because I think that out of the 60 some odd teams that are in this championship, it's not legit. They totally screwed that up. No, it's a little bit of a nice little, it's sort of like what they're saying today about one guy was talking about how, oh, you know what? Another reason that this is good is because we like to debate about who should be number 5 or who should be number 4. This is what we want. This is, as fans, this is what the fans want. The fans want to debate over this stuff. And it is, so this person actually believes that when we talk about this stuff, that the reason that we are debating over it is because it's what we want to do. We want to debate over this. This is something that we get psyched up for when the season begins, is to get to the point at the end of the season that we can get really angry and upset that Team 5 didn't get in when they deserved to get in over Team 4 or Team 3. All right. This is what we're dealing with. So, all right. Now, as far as the matchups are concerned, I'm a little bit surprised that Georgia's the number 4 team in Vegas out of the 4. Again, not totally surprised that Alabama's number 1. I'm also not totally surprised that Alabama is the favorite in the game against Clemson. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that that's look, I need some time to analyze this. I need to see Alabama, how healthy they're going to be for the game. Of course, I'm leaning towards Clemson in this one if you've been listening to this network long enough, because as of today, there is absolutely no doubt in my mind that Clemson would beat Alabama. But we have a month. We have a month to talk about this. We have a month to go. Again, we have to check injuries. We also have to talk about I'm sorry, but being not necessarily favorite or underdog, but just the feel of the game. Alabama. People are going to say Alabama's going to have some revenge here. Or why does Alabama have revenge? They've split, so this is basically going to be their third game. I don't see. There's no revenge for Alabama. Okay. But what there is I do want to kind of hear how the storyline is going to go with this game. See how it's developing. again, I'm leaning towards Clemson right now. The only way that I would go with Alabama is that they get healthy. That because we talked about this for what about a good month. About a matter of fact, we talked about this right after the Mississippi State game when Sean Dion Hamilton was out, the number one rated inside linebacker, senior prospect for our lads. As soon as he was out, and it showed against Mississippi State, we talked about how that this is just not gonna. They're not going to be at Auburn, and they're not winning the national championship like this. Well, if he's able to come back, well, that changes everything. Okay, now will that change my mind to go? All right, I'm going with Alabama over Clemson. I don't know. I mean, right now the answer is no, but we'll see. Fact is, I think Clemson's the team to beat right now. That's why it's called an early impression. That's what my early impression is. Now, the Georgia Oklahoma game, I wish this was being split up because these are my two top future teams. I have both of them. And I think Georgia, Georgia, I would actually, they're the team that I would make more money on, and it's partly the reason why that I like them, and I like both of these teams again for a reason. Now, I would like to see these two teams in the championship, not just because I had money on them, but that's the whole reason I put money on them in the futures, was because I believed in them enough. So I don't like the fact. See, in one way, it's nice that at least I know I'm going to have one of them in the championship game. It's another one to know that one of them won't be in the championship game, and I will have a winner take all. Even though if Clemson's in, at least I'll be in a potential break even situation, just like Oklahoma. I mean, really, if I have an Oklahoma Clemson championship game, my futures are pretty much break even. Georgia's the one where I make the most money because Georgia was the one and still is right now the one I believe in the most. And the reason is because they came out against Auburn on Saturday, and they looked like the team that I hoped I was going to see when they played Auburn the first time, and I didn't see it. And I'll also say this, and that is that I'm not sure we would have saw what we ended up seeing the rest of that game if it wasn't for that sack and strip of Stidham at 7-0. If they don't get that turnover at that point in the game, and Auburn goes up 10-0, I'm sorry, but I think Auburn wins this football game. And they may even have won the game the same way they won the first game. But that play changed everything. It changed everything. And Georgia got all the momentum back, and all the momentum actually for the first time in the game, and never relinquished it. That was the play of the game. It was the play of the year. It was also part of the reason why I've said for a long time, leading up until the last few weeks when Stidham actually started to look good, that because Stidham played the game the way that he had played prior. He played the championship game the way that he played against Clemson. He played the championship game the way that he played against LSU. Part of the reason was because he had to throw the football in those games. He had to throw the football in this game because Kerryon Johnson was not right. Now, Kerryon Johnson, I'll tell you, there's a couple of things that went wrong here. One, Kerryon, you could tell right off the bat, the first, 3 or 4 carries that Kerryon Johnson had, that he didn't have it. He did not have it. And at that point, Gus Malzahn should have been smart enough to stop feeding him the ball because he didn't have it. This isn't Herschel Walker or Bo Jackson. All right, this is a nice kid that's had a nice season. That's your best back. There ain't no question about that. But the kid's not Superman. And when he didn't have it, you should have sat him. I'm sorry. It wasn't worth it to keep feeding him the ball. Now, I will say this. When they came out of the second half and he got the ball for a few times, he had more speed in a few of those plays than I had seen from before, which leads me to believe he had one of those talks at halftime. Wink, wink. You know what I'm talking about? Not just talks, but I'm going to go behind closed doors, and I'll see you in a few minutes, and then we'll see what happens. Because, boy, did he look like a completely different back on a couple of those carries. And I started to think, okay, fine, if that's the way he's going to start running now. And then all of a sudden, he fumbled the ball. And that was it. Now, if he doesn't fumble, and they keep moving the football, and everything's going well, and they march down and they score, and he still, seems to have that extra juice that he got at halftime, maybe we got a different story. But the fumble ended. It ended any sort of potential, re-energy from the team, from the player. But credit Georgia for making some hits. Roquan Smith, we've talked a lot about him over the last few weeks. He's turning into a major stud as far as the draft is concerned, definitely on this network. But Georgia, remember, I think it was about a week or two ago. I think it was when I was talking to Anthony Dasher regarding Georgia. And I think it was that. But I had a conversation with one of these analysts, and I said, if the way I'm looking at this, even though Auburn should be the favorite, and this was also before this was before the whole thing with knowing that Kerryon Johnson was maybe wouldn't play, which Auburn was the favorite. And by the way, Georgia was the favorite by game time because everybody knew by game time that Kerryon Johnson wasn't going well. They looked at him on the field in the warmups. He didn't look right. The odds completely switched. People put a lot of late money on Georgia. Georgia went off as a 1 or 2 point favorite after being nearly a 3-point dog a few days ago. That's how important the running game was, because if you take the running game away from Auburn, Stidham has to beat you, and when he has to beat you, he's not going to beat you. So anybody that thinks Jarrett Stidham is anywhere even close to being ready to be an NFL quarterback is nuts. Now, I don't even know if Stidham has what it takes to be an NFL quarterback, period. But he's got a lot of work to do if he thinks that he's going to mature into a quarterback on the next level, because he doesn't have any of that right now. The only thing he's got going for him is his ability, which the scouts love, is to be a high accuracy kid. That's it. He's got the high accuracy, but he doesn't have it up here. He's mobile and all that, and that helps too. And yes, he doesn't have the best receivers in the world, and that's something that you can excuse him for. But when the pressure's on, he just isn't very good. I'm not talking about the pressure of the big spotlight pressure. I'm talking about when he's under pressure. When he has to run with the ball, and he's got to make throws, and he's got to, come up big. He's got to be somebody that can, without the running game, he's somebody that, okay, we can count on Jarrett Stidham. And you can't. You cannot count on Jarrett Stidham when there is no running game. And with no Kerryon Johnson, no running game, some turnovers, Auburn had nothing. And credit Georgia, because the first part of that game, up until that turnover at 7-0 Auburn, up until that point right there, Georgia was looking like the same team that lost Auburn the first time. They were making mistakes. The stage is too big. They just were not in it. As psychologically, they just weren't ready to win this game or anything close to a national championship. And all of that changed, and it changed so much over the rest of that game and the win that, as I did say a couple of weeks ago, that the winner of the game between Georgia and Auburn, because even though I liked Auburn to win the national championship based on that situation, of course, Kerryon Johnson getting hurt changed all that, but getting to the point where if Georgia can win this game, and I didn't care about the Kerryon Johnson situation, just if Georgia can win the game, then that would be such a big win for them psychologically, with as good as they were coming into the first Auburn game, that they were going to be really tough to beat. And that's the way I feel right now. Now that they have beaten Auburn, and to me, it does not matter how they beat them. It does not matter that they beat them because, majorly in part, because Kerryon Johnson was hurt. It does not matter to me, because it doesn't matter to them, because especially to kids, psychologically speaking, that's not how you think. Psychologically speaking, all you know is you beat them. You beat them, and you don't care about you don't go, oh yeah, we beat them, but yeah, I don't think we're that good anyway because their running back was hurt. You don't think that way, nor should you. You just think we beat them. We're the best team in the SEC, and we can beat anybody. And then the quarterback, because they were able to, and that's the other thing too. If you flip it, it wasn't just the one side of the ball. The confidence also showed up on the other side, because once the light switch turned on for Georgia right after that first turnover, it's like all of a sudden it was like, hey, wait a second, and boom, it's like even the offense started to get going more. And I also think what really helped Georgia in this game was the whole situation with how tough it is. We talk about this a lot, how tough it is to play the big championship game. See, for Alabama, when they won the big show, when they beat Auburn the last couple of years, first of all, Auburn wasn't as good as they were a few years ago. So, but it's still a rivalry game, and emotionally you go through that. But then the next week they were playing Florida teams that had no offense the last 2 years in the SEC championship game, so they weren't going to lose those games anyway. Everybody knew that they were heavy favorites. But it's very difficult for Auburn to play the big rivalry game, to beat Alabama, and in a week's time, you've got to go away from home, and then you've got to play a team that you just beat a few weeks ago, and then you got to do it without your best offensive player. So and on top of that, for the defense, as good as the Auburn defense was, the defense, which was super psyched, super into playing the games that they played 2 out of the last 3 weeks, especially the game against Alabama, to ask them to come up with the same intensity and it'd be the same. This is why when we talked about how difficult it was going to be for Auburn to win the national championship, was because no team can beat the teams that Auburn was going to have to beat. At some point, they were going to slip up, be it an injury, be it turnovers, whatever. But you cannot beat Georgia, Alabama, Georgia, and then 2 playoff teams and do it without at some point slipping up in that short span of time. And that's exactly what happened to Auburn. And this is why, because you have to play so many games against quality teams. You got to get up for these games constantly, week after week. And you have to completely stay healthy, and you got to get the breaks and stay away from turnovers. And it's just very tough. So, but for Georgia, the fact is psychologically they've hit the hurdle. They're now going to go into these playoff games with so much confidence, because now they are no longer that team that they were against Auburn. Now, and the first time, now they are no longer that team that they were in the beginning of the SEC championship game. Now they are a much better team. They are the best that they've been all season. They have a young quarterback now that I said in the very beginning of the season, even though I believe that Eason would be a better fit for them to win a national championship this year. The fact is Georgia loves this kid Fromm. They believe he's a better quarterback than Eason anyway. And so you know what? It's his job now. Let's just give it to him and go with it. And now all of a sudden Fromm is getting more experience. He's played in some big games already. He had a very solid game in the SEC championship game. His confidence is at an all-time high, and now he gets to go into these playoffs. And at least in the first game, he's not going to have to worry about an Auburn or Alabama type defense, because that's not what Oklahoma has. So if Georgia's going to lose to Oklahoma, it's because Georgia's defense ain't going to be able to stop Oklahoma, even though I'm not so sure that's the case. Look, Baker Mayfield and Oklahoma is going to score points, okay? But the fact is how many points will Georgia be able to score? Now there's a lot more confidence that Georgia is going to be able to really score a lot more points, because Fromm showed that on the big stage, in this kind of a situation, and especially since he's going up against an Oklahoma defense and anything like Auburn, that he'll be fine. So right now, I'd actually have to lean towards Georgia to beat Oklahoma as of today, lean towards Clemson to beat Alabama as of today, and lean towards Georgia, the team that I put most of my future money on in the first place for a reason, to go ahead and to beat Clemson in the national championship game. So that's the way I'm looking at it right now. Georgia and Clemson in the national championship game, with Georgia beating Clemson. All right. Now, as far as some of these other bowl games, they're usually pretty bad. The matchups are terrible. You know, with so many teams in the bowl games, you would think that there would be a way for you to come up with some really good matchups, and most of them, like 80% of them, stink. All right, early on the 16th, which is a week from Saturday, right? So that's when it gets going. Next week's the Army-Navy game. Then after that, by the way, Navy's a favorite of Army, and they shouldn't be. Army's clearly a better team than Navy this year, especially with the quarterback situation, injuries that Navy's had. Like, even if Zach Abbey plays, I'm sorry, Army's a better team than Navy this year. So Army's definitely the play over Navy on Saturday, but we'll talk more about that when we have a chance later in the week. But the week after that, a week from Saturday, the top game would probably be Oregon-Boise State, the Las Vegas Bowl. Oregon's a 7-point favorite. They're going to have some distractions, though, because it looks like Willie Taggart, and we talked about this with one of our analysts last week. It looks like Willie Taggart is, because he's interviewing for the job at Oregon. Florida State. He's going to go to Florida State. I think right now it'd be a shock if Willie Taggart is not the next coach at Florida State. And because it looks like that's going to be the case, if Willie Taggart leaves Oregon, I think Boise's a really good play there as a 7-point dog. Especially the dogs are usually the way to go anyway in these bowl games, and that's definitely a dog that I would go with. So that would be the most entertaining game a week from Saturday. As far as some other games that stick out, let's see if the ones that stick out. Not many of them do, of course, especially early on. Let's see. We don't know about Josh Rosen or Josh Allen's status yet. I think Josh Rosen will play, but Josh Allen we don't know yet because I think he plays a little bit earlier. Florida State goes to an Independence Bowl. Really good opportunity for a young team that doesn't get a chance to play Florida State very much. And we talked about this a couple of days ago. Yeah, that'd be kind of cool. Maybe Memphis plays Florida State or, one of those teams. No. Florida State will play Southern Miss in the Independence Bowl. All right, so there you go. So Florida State has to lower themselves and play in one of these lower bowls. Great opportunity for an up-and-coming program to go mano-a-mano with the Florida State Seminoles, and they give us Southern Miss as an opponent. See? That's what I'm talking about. Now, I am going to be intrigued about the Pinstripe Bowl between Boston College and Iowa because right off the bat, that would be a pretty close game to call. I might even lean towards Boston College in that one. But I'm going to tell you, I think Iowa is probably going to win this game. And I think they might even smoke BC because I think Iowa probably is getting a little sick and tired over the last 24 hours about hearing themselves looked about as this like anemic program. How can Ohio State lose to Iowa by 30 points? You can't lose to Iowa by 30 points. I mean, that's just crazy. And, when they're comparing why Ohio State shouldn't be in over Alabama. And so here we go. Let's flip it again. Let's talk about Clemson. So wait a second. It's really bad for Ohio State to lose, even though I get it. They lost by 30. But they lost to Iowa. All right. And I'm sorry. But Iowa's a good program. Okay. And some years they're a very good football team. Syracuse, Clemson lost to. Okay, Syracuse. All right, so I'm supposed to. You actually think that I'm more what? I would be more embarrassed to lose as a program to Iowa by 30 than to lose period to Syracuse if I'm a team trying to win a national championship? Are you insane? The loss that's worse is the Syracuse loss. But you want to try to fit your narrative by the team you like and the team you don't like. And there you go. And everybody's ripping Iowa. So maybe Iowa's going to be a little bit upset about that. Forster Farms Bowl at Santa Clara, it will be a good one. That's Arizona and Khalil Tate going up against Jeff Brom and Purdue. So that is a game that I'm interested in. Let's see here. Who else? What other game am I interested in? And I don't know who I like in that game yet. I don't even know if there are odds. So Arizona's favored by 3 in that one. Let's see. You know how high I've been on Gary Odom and Missouri for the past month or so. So I like Missouri as a 2-point favorite against Texas in the Texas Bowl. That's on the 27th. Let's see. TCU Stanford should be a good game. That's the Alamo Bowl. TCU favored by 2. I do like Stanford in that game for sure over TCU. And let's see. Washington State's favored by 2 against Michigan State in the Holiday Bowl. I definitely like Wake Forest as a 3-point favorite in the Belk Bowl in Charlotte against A&M. A&M without a coach, so we'll have the interim coach thing. You know how much we've been behind Wake Forest and Dave Clawson this season, so love Wake Forest in that game as a 3-point favorite against Texas A&M. Let's see. Oh, by the way, Arizona State plays the Sun Bowl without Todd Graham, and they have hired Herm Edwards as the head coach. And when I heard about Herm Edwards last week as the head coach, I couldn't believe it. I mean, it's like, seriously, you went from Todd Graham to Herm Edwards? Seriously? Doesn't everybody realize what college is about? It's about recruiting. Where in the world is Herm Edwards? I mean, at this point, he hasn't been in college since he's been in college. So how on earth does he have the kind of staff that he needs in order to recruit? So I don't understand any of that, but okay, whatever, fine. You got Herm Edwards at Arizona State. Fact is, North Carolina State will probably win that game anyway. They're a 7-point favorite in El Paso. Definitely like Northwestern against Kentucky in the Music City Bowl. Definitely like Louisville against Mississippi State in the Tax Slayer Bowl in Jacksonville. Mississippi State without Mullen and Louisville, of course. And I'm not even sure they're going to have their quarterback ready. But I'll tell you right now, if Mississippi State better have their quarterback back, because even if they do, I like Louisville. But if they don't, then Louisville should destroy Mississippi State. Especially after what happened to Louisville last year in the bowl game. I'm sure they want a little bit of payback just for themselves. Liberty Bowl, Memphis is the home team against Iowa State, but I don't care. Iowa State's definitely the play. I mean, Iowa State has surpassed all sorts of expectations by anybody this season. Campbell's now locked up. Iowa State has been they have been neglected all season long, and they're being neglected again. They're in the Big 12, not Memphis. I don't care that it's a Memphis home game. Iowa State is definitely the better team, and Iowa State is the play. Also, congratulations to New Mexico State for being in a bowl game for the first time since 1960. Michigan's an 8-point favorite over South Carolina in the Outback. They should be able to cover that, especially because they're going to get Peters back by then. Of course, if they don't get Peters back by then I'll take South Carolina. LSU's a 2-point favorite in the Citrus Bowl over Notre Dame. That's a decent matchup, of course, but I will need some time to think about that because I don't know. I don't trust Notre Dame all of a sudden. They've fallen apart this year at the end of the season. And then the really big games, Ohio State's a 6-point favorite in the Cotton Bowl against USC. That one I definitely like USC. That is a great dog to play, the Trojans. Now, of course, Barrett's going to be healthy by then. But I don't care. Look, they were what we thought they were. They're not. This is not a great Urban Meyer team. They were very fortunate to beat Wisconsin because they had a few plays in the game that broke open because Wisconsin couldn't tackle, and because they were far superior in speed and athleticism, which they're not going to be against USC. USC is the better team. USC will beat them outright. So I love the fact that the Trojans are getting 6 in the Cotton Bowl. In the Fiesta Bowl, a game that you know I'll love, and that's Penn State is only a 3-point favorite against Washington. Washington can beat up, the teams that they're going to beat up, but they don't beat any good teams. I'm sorry, they just haven't. This season, they're just not very good. We saw last season, too. When they got to the playoffs, they got pounded. Sorry, but Penn State should have no problem with Washington in the Fiesta Bowl. Now, the Orange Bowl should be interesting because Miami, it's like a home game, of course. Wisconsin's a 6-point favorite. I do like Wisconsin. How can you not after watching Miami play? But we'll see. Miami's going to have some time to get ready for that. End of the season. Rick's a good coach. We'll see about that. But Wisconsin's obviously the better team. But, hey, again, bowl games, upsets. Miami may be a good upset pick. We'll talk more about that in the coming weeks. Here's a good upset. Central Florida over Auburn. I'm sorry, but Auburn has got to be feeling pretty bad about how the season went and when it was all said and done. Okay, they beat Alabama, and that does matter. This is in the Peach Bowl. But and I'm always saying this is a good upset, even though I know Scott Frost is off to Nebraska. But it's just if you're looking for upsets, Central Florida is not a bad play. Now, the key is of course, going to be Kerryon Johnson because I can't see Central Florida being able to stop Auburn. But I'm just saying, if you're looking for an upset, this isn't a bad upset. But we'll see. We'll have more time to talk about that one as well. All right. Now, by the way, the other coaching news, just to let you know, Mike Norvell is looking like he may be an Arkansas guy. So is Chad Morris. Chad Morris looks like he's either going to Arkansas or Tennessee. Right now, it looks like the SMU coach is going to one of those two places. But Mike Norvell, possibly to Arkansas. We talked about that on last week's show. On one of last week's show with one of our guests, so that's a possibility. And for Tennessee, they're talking to Morris, they're talking to Les Miles, they're talking about Venables and Tucker, the defensive coordinators for Clemson and Georgia. And those are the two big schools left as long as Taggart goes to Florida State, which is what we think will happen. All right, now in the NFL, I was hearing today that on one of the programs that Gronkowski should get 2 to 4 games minimum for his hit in the game against Buffalo. I can't believe that hit. That hit was the worst hit I've seen all season. He needs to suspend it for 2 to 3 games. Donovan McNabb, 2 to 4 games minimum. Rob Gronkowski. And how many times on this network do I got to tell you to stop listening to Donovan McNabb? Now, of course, you might be saying, well, why are you listening to Donovan McNabb? And I, of course, have to remind everybody it's because it's my job. It's more part of the media. But you don't listen to Donovan McNabb because he has no idea what he's talking about. And as soon as they were going 2 to 4 games and all that, especially McNabb, 4 games. Rob Gronkowski's not going to get 4 games. Now, look, was it a bad hit because of the concussion? Absolutely. Absolutely. And I've talked about this a lot of times that some of these situations that you see with these hits will be enforced harsher because of how the player is hurt. But if White was and look, I am a little bit surprised knowing that he had a concussion that the NFL didn't suspend him for a couple of games. But without the concussion, I would have been like, oh, it's going to be a game. That's it. That's all he's going for. So I'm not surprised, of course. He's suspended for a game. That's it. That's all he should be suspended for. And I don't care that it's the worst hit you've seen all year, which to tell you the truth, I don't even think that's the case. All right. Now, once again, he hit him in his head. But I don't look at it as Gronk was going, oh, I got to nail him in his head. I just think Gronk wanted to nail him. And he nailed him and he hit his head. All right, that's it. That's what happened. I kind of find it interesting that a lot of the same type of analysts who had no problem with what happened to Joe Flacco with Kiko Alonso, all of a sudden are having a problem here. Because I'm sorry, the hit from Kiko Alonso to Joe Flacco was worse than what happened with Gronkowski. Okay? So that's why Gronk gets 1 game. So 2 to 4 games, especially when you go to 4, like the 2 is okay if you go 1 to 2, all right? Or you go 1 and he gets 2, or you go 2, but I'll take 1. But when you go, he should get 2 to 4 games. You're flipping out. All right, now Reese and McAdoo are fired. We know that by now. This is no big surprise. The thing, of course, that we talked about the other day, which is what everybody is talking about now, is okay, but this isn't fair because McAdoo, there's no way McAdoo made the call to bench Eli on his own. So was this then had to be a Reese McAdoo decision, and is that the reason why both of them are gone? But then Mara says, oh, we didn't, that had nothing to do with it. You can't trust anything they say. Now Eli is going to start again this week, which is also ridiculous. I'm not saying you have to go back to Geno. I said this last week. If you want to start Geno first game, that's fine. He's been the number 2 all year. He deserves to get the first start. And you want to go to Davis Webb starting this week for the rest of the season, that's what you should do. Going back to Eli Manning is stupid. It's dumb. All right, it just shows that you're weak as a franchise, that you're caving into the media. It's the only reason they're doing this. They're caving into the media. It's just people make me sick. The ones that cave in to peer pressure, media, or like what happened in Tennessee, the whole Schiano fiasco, because people, nutty people were talking about Schiano being linked to the Penn State scandal. Those weak, and by the way, that guy's been fired by now, which he should be because he's weak. So people that make those decisions are weak. All right, you should have enough confidence in yourself, in your own state of mind, in your own smarts, your ability to say, I know what I'm doing. All right, I understand how to, especially for a franchise that's won Super Bowls. Hey, I've won Super Bowls here. I've been a part of championship teams. I know what I'm doing. I don't need to cave in, especially in New York, for crying out loud. I mean, we'll talk more about this on the Jet Show tomorrow with Jan Levine. But, I mean, sometimes when you're not hearing it, especially since I don't live in New York, the fact is that when you do hear what they talk about in New York, about the every week, every day kind of stuff, boy, does it make you realize things differently. It's like people are really saying that on the air. And then, of course, because that's all you get is like a certain group of people okay, these are the people I got to, of course, hey, I'm in New York and these are the people I listen to. And it's no wonder that people in New York, especially the fans, wind up getting a false sense of what's actually right or wrong. Because these crazy people that are the media people that say what they say. I mean, I got people talking. I got some people on WFAN, some of their talk show hosts, screaming for Todd Bowles to get fired, and he's an idiot. Last week after the game, and I've been saying all season on the Jet Show, or most of the season, that Todd Bowles has done a very good job. And matter of fact, even Manish Mehta, who I don't agree with very often, said that this is proof after what happened yesterday that he should be hired. Right now, they should give him an extension, and I agree. I've said that all season. I think Bowles has done a very good job. But yet, you talk to some of these other WFAN people, and they're out the tank. Now, so the point is you wonder what's going on here with the peer pressure in New York about what they have to deal with all week with Eli Manning. All right, now, as far as the playoff situation in the NFL, AFC, we know the Patriots and Pittsburgh, that's all set. Pittsburgh plays Cincinnati tonight. The only reason that game means something is with Antonio Brown may or may not play for your fantasy leagues. And Cincinnati, if they get a win, they are right there for the wild card spot because they would be tied with Buffalo at 6-6. They would be tied with the AFC West loser at 6-6. That would be 2 out of those 3 teams. And they would be a game ahead of the Jets and the Dolphins at 5-7. So what is that? That is 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 teams that right now are fighting for 6 spots in the AFC playoff picture. Now, in the West, all 3 teams are 6-6. Now, I'm still picking the Chiefs to win. And the reason is, I've said this for the last few weeks, that the Chiefs, what they do is they get into these crutches when things aren't going well, and they slowly work themselves out of it. Doesn't happen instantaneously. And that's exactly, and what we saw yesterday was the beginning of them working themselves out of it. And that's why I feel very confident that when it's all said and done, as much as I'm going to root for the Chargers, the Chiefs are going to win this division. Now, the Raiders are never going to win this division. The Raiders are not a very good football team. The Raiders are so fortunate that they have played Denver and the Giants in back-to-back weeks. They have played any teams that were anywhere decent, and they would be out of the playoff picture already. But they're still hanging out and in the race. Now, the Chiefs are going to have a lot to say about this division with the two. They're playing the Raiders next week at home, and then the Chargers the week after that at home. And that's also a good situation for the Chiefs. Why I believe that they're going to be able to right the ship and be 8-6 after those 2 weeks. Chargers, meanwhile, they will play the Raiders at home week 17. So good situation there that everybody gets to play each other before it's all said and done. Tennessee, Jacksonville, tied in the South. And the loser is going to wind up being one of those wild card teams right now. It's looking like Tennessee was able to escape Houston. These 2 teams will play Week 17 in Tennessee. And by the way, Tennessee beat Jacksonville Week 2, 37-16. But look, I said this a couple weeks ago. I like Jacksonville, and I still do. A couple weeks ago, I picked Jacksonville to win this division and Arizona to beat them. So, and I picked Jacksonville to beat up on the Colts last week, and they did. I like Jags. Look, I don't like Bortles, but I do like Jacksonville better than Tennessee. I don't care that game's in Tennessee. I think Jacksonville is going to win the AFC South. And right now, it does look like Tennessee is going to have enough because of Mariota to get that final spot in the playoffs. I would say, though, like right now, I would say New England, Pittsburgh, Jacksonville wins the South, Chiefs win the West, and then I'm going to go ahead and say the Chargers and the Titans are going to be the 2 playoff teams. Buffalo, I think they just proved they were a 1-week wonder. No way Bengals. Jets could be interesting. We'll see what happens. We'll talk about them. They should beat Denver, and then they'll be in a good situation. Well, they'll be in a situation to actually be playing for something interesting. Josh McCown clearly had the best game that he has played in a long time. He had a great game against Kansas City. And forget about Miami. In the NFC, Philly and Minnesota now tied. Minnesota beat Atlanta. That was what I thought would happen, and they did. Minnesota just not getting enough respect. I've been rolling with the Vikings now for the past several weeks, and they keep making me look good. I didn't buy into Atlanta. And I'm glad I didn't. So Minnesota beat Atlanta. Philly comes back down to life, loses to Seattle. I am a little bit concerned about Doug Peterson's decision-making in that game. Reminded me about some of the poor decisions he made last year for the Eagles. But it's only one game, so I'm willing to forgive him. But look, Philly's, I tell you what, Philly, you're going to want to play at home. You're going to want to get home field. I don't think Philly is going to want to go to Minnesota and beat Minnesota in the NFC Championship game. Now, New Orleans, They beat Carolina like I thought they would. As I've mentioned, even though they were all hanging in there together last week after New Orleans dropped the game to the Rams, I still felt very confident the Saints were the cream of the crop in the South, and they proved it on Sunday. They're going to win this division. They play Atlanta on Thursday night. Matter of fact, Atlanta and New Orleans will play 2 out of the next 3 weeks, including Thursday night in Atlanta. New Orleans will beat Atlanta on Thursday night and prove to everybody who is the best team in that division. And New Orleans will win the NFC South. Rams and Seattle right now, because Seattle was able to beat the Eagles, and the way that they beat the Eagles, that means Seattle will make the playoffs. So Seattle is going to play the Rams next week to find out who wins the division. Because if Seattle beats the Rams and beats them twice, Seattle's going to wind up winning that division. But right now, you're going to have Philly, Minnesota battling it out, but both of those teams will end up with the bye. Then you're going to have New Orleans as the 3 team, and then it's going to be the NFC West champ is 4, the NFC champ runner-up is 5, and the final spot will go down to either Carolina, Atlanta, or Dallas, Detroit, Green Bay, all 6-6. Washington, Arizona, 5-7. Now forget Washington, Arizona, they're done. Forget Dallas too. And you know what, to that extent, forget Detroit. You know, I've never been a big Jim Caldwell guy. Now for Green Bay, remember last week I told you we added Green Bay to our futures at 200-1, because if they could squeeze by and set themselves up, get into Week 15, 3 more games with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback, they might be able to pull something out here. Now, the problem is it's not going to be easy because they're a couple games behind Carolina right now, especially Seattle. You know, what would have really helped Green Bay big time was the best team in football at that point, record-wise, beating Seattle. And then Green Bay would have been right there with Seattle, a game back. But they lost to Seattle. I mean, Seattle won. So that really puts Green Bay kind of out of it now, unless Carolina can fall back, because Carolina's got a tough schedule. Carolina has to play Minnesota. Well, actually, Carolina does play Green Bay, but they play Atlanta on the road Week 17, and they play Minnesota. So there is a little, but I mean that's it. I mean, see, if Green Bay can beat Carolina, and you have Aaron Rodgers back, now all of a sudden we've got something to talk about, because I believe that game that Carolina plays Green Bay is the Week 15 game, which we may get Aaron Rodgers back. Look, Aaron Rodgers comes back Week 15 against Carolina. We've got a big story here. But if not, forget it. It's just a pipe dream, and Carolina's looking pretty good. But chances are the Carolina game at Atlanta, Week 17, could determine the final spot as far as the wild card is concerned in the NFC. And I don't know what to say about that right now. I think it's just way too early for me to say that because I like Minnesota over Carolina, and I like New Orleans over Atlanta. So I think, in my opinion, I think when we talk next week, Carolina will still be leading Atlanta by just a game. And maybe by then, you never know, maybe Green Bay and could be Dallas or Detroit moves up a little bit closer as well. So still a lot to determine there. As well there should be, as far as the playoffs are concerned in the NFL. Okay, so that'll do it. Now, tomorrow we've got our Jet Show, so that is going to be coming up. Don't have a time for that yet, though, but we will have the Jet Show. And, again, that's going to air at some point. Usually I do the Jet Show on Mondays, but my co-host, Jan Levine, was a little bit tied up. So he is going to be with me tomorrow. And we'll talk about we have a lot to talk about with the Jets. You know, Jets big win, still kind of in the playoff hunt. Look, if you're 5-7 in the AFC, you have a much better chance of thinking like you've got a real serious opportunity to sneak into the playoffs. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about Josh McCown. We'll talk about Todd Bowles. We'll talk about it all on Jets Uncovered. And that'll be at some point tomorrow. And then we'll make it available on demand. That's why you want to follow us on Twitter at PrimeSN for all of our on-demand announcements. And that includes, of course, everything that happens here on the Our Lads Football Radio Network. Also, keep in mind, you can go to YouTube or iTunes. That's where all of our on-demand shows are also available. Now, you want to go to ourlads.com. But just keep in mind, you can go to Prime Sports Network's YouTube or iTunes pages as well. And we'll see you next time Matter of fact, that's tomorrow. Our guest tomorrow will be Mitch Light from Athlon. We're going to talk to Mitch about what took place this past weekend in college football and the whole debate as far as the playoffs are concerned. So that's 2 o'clock tomorrow, Mitch Light of Athlon. And then on Wednesday at 11 a.m., Mike Huguenin returns. Same thing. We'll update what's going on as far as coaches, college playoffs, and bowls with Mike. And then, of course, on Thursday, Tony Mejia joins me to preview Week 14 in the NFL, and I'm sure much more. So that's the whole week so far on the Our Lads Football Radio Network. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Degrading us.